Tom Hardy, empath, narcissist, or something else? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Part 3, we're going to look at the relationship between Tom Hardy and his parents to ascertain, is there anything about his parents that might suggest the presence of a narcissist or an empath, and how has that impacted on the relationship with Tom Hardy? The familial interaction between the subject and the subject's parents is often telling with regard to appropriate evidence to help us make that determination. Tom Hardy's father is Edward Chips Hardy. He's a British writer, primarily known for his work in advertising as a copywriter and later as a comedy writer and producer. He has collaborated with Tom Hardy on creative projects, most notably as a co-creator, writer, and consulting producer for the BBC series Taboo from 2017, where Tom starred as James Delaney. Chips studied at Cambridge University, indicating a strong academic background, and his career in writing reflects a creative and intellectual bent. Specific details about Chips' personality are few and far between. The fact that he had a professional collaboration with his son suggests a supportive and creative environment. It might, of course, mean that he demonstrates a need for control in such a collaboration, or this might be the presence of emotional empathy, demonstrating a willingness to engage with his son's ambitions and a shared creative sensibility. There's no public information demonstrating any kind of domineering or problematic personality, but rather the impression that is provided is of a figure who has supported his son's career. He provided a stable financial and cultural environment, and it's evident that his creative profession likely influenced Tom Hardy's early exposure to the arts, fostering an environment where artistic pursuits were valued. Anne Hardy was an artist of Irish descent. Her work as an artist suggests a creative and possibly introspective personality, contributing to the overall artistic atmosphere of the Hardy household. There is little public information about her specific artistic contributions or career trajectory, but her role as an artist aligns with the family's creative leanings. Her artistic background implies a degree of sensitivity and creativity, which may well have resonated with her son's own interests in acting and storytelling. No evidence has been unearthed to suggest that the relationship was overtly problematic or one that was unsupportive. There's limited information about her parenting style. The absence of negative accounts either suggests that the Hardy household was one which operated behind a facade, one which Hardy himself has not penetrated and prefers to maintain, or the fact is that there was a stable environment in Tom Hardy's childhood, and that his childhood struggles with rebellion and substance abuse indicate that the influence of his parents alone was insufficient to curb his self-destructive tendencies. This may well support the fact that such behaviours didn't come as a consequence of a lack of control environment or a genetic predisposition towards such behaviours from either parent, but some other aspect of the behaviour of Tom Hardy which he appears to now have under control. Both Chips and Anne Hardy appear to have fostered a creative environment that has influenced Tom Hardy's career path. The household clearly valued artistic expression, which likely encouraged Tom's early interest in acting. His enrolment in prestigious drama schools like Richmond Drama School and the Drama Centre London indicates parental support for his pursuit of acting, since such programmes require financial and emotional investment. It's interesting that Hardy has never publicly criticised his parents or described them as unsupportive. In interviews, such as the one that he undertook with Esquire in 2018, he reflected on his childhood with a focus on his own struggles rather than actually blaming his parents, which suggests that, first of all, they were not a primary source of conflict, and furthermore, it would appear to be the absence of blame shifting on the part of Hardy. Alternatively, is this a well-managed facade whereby his form of narcissism knows better than to engage in such blatant pity-playing and blame-shifting? There's no definitive evidence in the available sources that Chips or Anne Hardy were overtly problematic in a way that had directly harmed their son. They're not described as neglectful, abusive, or overly controlling. However, Tom's early descent into substance abuse, starting with glue sniffing and drinking aged 11, and his rebellious behaviour, including expulsions from school and an arrest for joyriding, suggest that there may well have been gaps in parental oversight, or an inability to fully manage his troubled behaviour. Might it be that the parents, whilst being essentially decent people, were perhaps somewhat self-absorbed and focused upon themselves, leading to these gaps in parental oversight which created a lack of control environment? It could be, from Hardy's own self-described discomfort with regard to being in his own skin and his struggles with addiction from a young age, could point to an environment where emotional or psychological needs were not being fully addressed, which again could support a lack of control environment. Interestingly, the middle-class stability, or at least the appearance of middle-class stability, of the Hardy household contrasts with Tom Hardy's delinquency. It suggests that perhaps his issues may have been driven by more internal factors or peer influences than by parental failings, and perhaps instead the lack of control environment came from elsewhere as opposed to it being the domestic situation. Unlike some public figures who openly discuss dysfunctional family dynamics, Tom Hardy has not publicly attributed his struggles to his parents' behaviour. The absence of such criticism may well be that the problematic aspects of their parenting were subtle, or a typical response to the navigation of a rebellious child's challenges. There's no documented evidence of any physical, emotional, psychological abuse by Chips or Anne Hardy towards Tom Hardy. Interviews and biographies don't mention any allegations or incidents of abuse. Hardy's own accounts of his childhood focus on his own behaviour rather than mistreatment by his parents. Accordingly, the lack of such claims, especially given Tom Hardy's candour about his personal struggles, suggests that abuse was not a feature of his upbringing. In adulthood, Tom Hardy's relationship with his parents, particularly his father, appears to have strengthened, as evidenced by their professional collaboration on Taboo. Working together on a high-profile project suggests a level of trust and mutual respect. Chips's role as a co-creator and writer indicates that Tom valued his father's creative input and sought to involve him in his career, pointing to a positive and collaborative relationship. Tom Hardy has spoken less publicly about his relationship with his mother, Anne. There are no reports of estrangement or conflict, but the lack of specific mention suggests a more private or less prominent dynamic compared to the relationship with his father. This may well just be the fact that it is demonstrative of privacy. Hardy has expressed a desire to give his own children a better childhood than he had, which could perhaps imply some dissatisfaction with his own upbringing. Again, he does not directly criticise his parents, which suggests either there were no issues, or the issues were not severe enough to cause lasting resentment, or if they do exist, they're carefully hidden behind a well-managed facade. Nothing hugely leaps out with regard to the childhood of Tom Hardy concerning his relationship with his parents and also his relationships with them in adulthood, which may well point to a stable background and unproblematic parents, and therefore Hardy's own childhood problems coming from an alternative source. All of this naturally will be considered together with more material that we're going to examine in part 4. Join me there.